"I'm scared of you," she admitted. The Mafia boss whispered, "Then I'll be gentle until you're not." The sliding glass doors of Eastbridge General Hospital hissed shut behind Emily Carter, cutting off the sharp scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of cardiac monitors. It was 3 a.m, and the city of Eastbridge was draped in a heavy, suffocating mist that blurred the streetlights into hazy halos of orange and yellow. Emily pulled her thin cardigan tighter around her scrub top, shivering not just from the damp chill of the night, but from the bone-deep exhaustion that seemed to live permanently in her marrow. Her shift had been a grueling 12 hours of trauma cases, overflow patients, and the endless, grinding administrative red tape that made saving lives feel like battling a hydra. Every muscle in her legs ached, a dull throb that synchronized with the pounding of her headache. She walked toward the bus stop, her sensible rubber-soled shoes silent against the wet pavement. In her pocket, her phone felt like a lead weight. She did not need to check it to know the screen was blank. Noah had not called. Her younger brother had been missing for 4 days. At first, she had told herself it was just another one of his phases, a long weekend crashing on a friend's couch or a sudden double shift at the warehouse he claimed to work at. But Noah was bad at lying, and he was even worse at hiding. For the last month, the bags under his eyes had been darker than hers, and his laughter had taken on a frantic, brittle edge. He had started wearing new sneakers he could not afford and taking phone calls in the bathroom, his voice dropping to a hushed, terrified whisper whenever she walked past the door. The bus ride to her apartment complex on the south side of the city was a blur of neon signs and empty streets. Emily leaned her forehead against the cold window, watching the rain streak the glass. She calculated numbers in her head to keep the panic at bay. Rent was due in 2 days. The electric bill was overdue by 2 weeks. If she picked up 3 extra shifts next month, she might be able to pay off the minimum balance on her student loans. When she finally trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, the hallway smelled of stale cigarette smoke and damp carpet. She reached for her keys, her hand trembling slightly from fatigue. Then she stopped. The door to apartment 3B was not white anymore. Someone had taken a knife to the cheap wood, deep. Jagged gouges marred the paint, splintering the surface to reveal the particle board beneath. Emily dropped her keys, the metallic jingle echoing loudly in the silent corridor. Her breath hitched in her throat as she stepped closer, her fingers hovering over the carvings without touching them. It was a message. "Time is up. Noah." Below the words, carved with precise, terrifying deliberation, was a symbol. It was a serpent coiled tightly around the blade of a dagger. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. She had seen that symbol before. Every nurse in Eastbridge General had seen it. It showed up on the tattoos of men who came in with gunshot wounds they refused to explain. It appeared in the background of news reports about racketeering and organized crime. It was the mark of the Moretti family. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her exhaustion. Emily fumbled for her keys on the floor, her fingernails scraping against the dirty carpet. She unlocked the door and threw it open. Half expecting to find Noah bleeding out on their thrift store sofa, the apartment was empty. It was exactly as she had left it. A few dirty coffee mugs in the sink, a pile of medical journals on the table, and Noah's unmade bed in the corner of the living room. But the air felt heavy, violated. They had been here. They had stood at her door and left a promise of violence. Emily grabbed her phone and dialed Noah's number for the 10th time that night. It went straight to voicemail. "Noah," she said, her voice cracking. "Please pick up. They were here. Please, just tell me where you are." She ended the call and stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving. She could not call the police. Everyone knew the Morettis owned half the precinct, and calling the cops would only accelerate whatever timeline Noah was on. She had to find him. She had to fix this. She remembered the matchbook she had found in Noah's jeans when she did the laundry last week. It was black with silver lettering, Inferno. It was a nightclub downtown, a place where a bottle of vodka cost more than her monthly rent. Noah had no business being there, which meant he was there for business. Emily did not change out of her scrubs. She did not have time. She grabbed her heavy trench coat, buttoned it to her chin to hide the hospital logo, and ran back out into the rain. Inferno lived up to its name, even from the street. The bass vibrated through the soles of Emily's shoes. A line of hopefuls stretched down the block, shivering in their designer jackets, waiting for the velvet rope to part. The bouncers at the front were mountains of muscle in black suits, wearing earpieces and expressions of absolute boredom. Emily bypassed the line, marching straight for the entrance with the single-minded focus she used during a code blue. "Back of the line, sweetheart," one of the bouncers rumbled. Stepping in her path, his chest was a wall of wool and muscle. Emily looked up at him, her eyes hard. She was exhausted. She was terrified, and she had absolutely no patience left. "I am here for a medical emergency," she lied, her voice projecting with the authority of a head nurse. "Unless you want a lawsuit for negligence on your hands, you will let me in to see the manager." The bouncer hesitated. He scanned her attire, the sensible shoes, the trench coat, the undeniable look of someone who dealt with life and death before breakfast. He glanced at his partner, then shrugged and unhooked the rope. "Make it quick." Emily pushed past him and into the dark throat of the club. Inside, the sensory overload was immediate. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, sweat, and ozone. Strobe lights sliced through the darkness, illuminating writhing bodies on the dance floor in flashes of purple and blue. The music was not just sound, it was physical force, rattling her ribcage. Emily kept her coat buttoned tight, moving through the crowd like a ghost. She scanned the faces of the men at the high tables, looking for Noah's messy brown hair or his nervous smile. She saw plenty of young men, but they were all polished, confident, laughing with drinks in their hands. None of them were her brother. She pushed deeper into the club, toward the VIP section, where the booths were lined in red velvet. She felt eyes on her. She did not belong here. She looked like a grim reality check in a fantasy world. Suddenly, the music shifted. The frantic beat dropped into a low, thrumming rhythm that felt ominous. A hush rippled through the room, starting from the VIP area and spreading outward like a wave. The dancers slowed. The laughter died down. Emily looked up. Overlooking the main floor was a glass-walled balcony, accessible only by a private staircase guarded by 2 more men. Standing at the railing, looking down at the crowd with the detached interest of a god watching ants, was a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with lethal precision. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was too sharp to be handsome in a conventional way. It was a face made of angles and shadows. Even from this distance, Emily felt the weight of his gaze. Luca Moretti. She knew his face from the newspapers, though the photos never did justice to the sheer, oppressive gravity of his presence. He was the king of Eastbridge, the man who moved the city's chess pieces while everyone else was just trying to survive the game. Emily realized with a jolt of certainty that Noah was not on the dance floor. If Noah was in trouble with the Morettis, he was wherever Luca Moretti kept his problems. She turned toward the stairs. "Hey!" a security guard barked as she ducked under the rope separating the general floor from the VIP access. "You can't go up there!" Emily ignored him. She sprinted up the first 3 steps before a large hand clamped around her upper arm, jerking her back. "Let go of me!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the lull in the music. She twisted, her nursing instincts taking over as she stomped on the guard's instep. He grunted but didn't release her. "I need to speak to him. I know he is up there." She pointed a shaking finger at the balcony. Above them, Luca Moretti did not move. He simply tilted his head, his eyes locking onto the commotion. He raised one hand, a single finger extending. The guard froze. He looked up at his boss, then back at Emily. "Bring her," a voice said. It wasn't shouted, yet it seemed to carry over the bass with impossible clarity. It came from the top of the stairs. The guard shoved Emily forward. "Move!" Emily stumbled but caught her balance on the railing. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She climbed the stairs, her legs feeling like jelly. Every step took her further away from the safety of her ordinary life and deeper into a world she only knew from emergency room whispers. At the top of the stairs, the air was cooler. The noise of the club was muffled by thick glass. Luca Moretti turned away from the railing and walked toward a seating area of dark leather couches. He sat down, crossing one leg over the other, and gestured for her to stand before him, up close. He was terrifying. His eyes were the color of espresso, dark and unreadable, framed by thick lashes that did nothing to soften his gaze. There was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a small imperfection that only highlighted the perfection of the rest of him. "You are causing a scene in my place of business," Luca said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth like expensive whiskey, but it burned going down. "You have 10 seconds to tell me why I should not have you thrown out the back exit." Emily took a breath. It rattled in her lungs. She gripped the edges of her coat, her knuckles turning white. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out clearly. "My brother is Noah Carter. I know you have him." The name landed in the silence between them. Luca did not blink. He did not look surprised. He simply reached for a crystal tumbler of amber liquid on the table, took a sip, and set it down with a soft clink. "Noah Carter," Luca repeated. He tasted the name. The boy who thinks he can play poker with money that does not belong to him. Emily's stomach dropped. "He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he is doing." "He's 22 years old," Luca corrected her, his tone devoid of sympathy. "Old enough to know that when you lose $50,000 of my money on a shipment that never arrives, there are consequences." "50,000?" Emily whispered. The number was astronomical. It was more money than she made in a year. "He doesn't have that kind of money." "I am aware," Luca said, "which is why he is currently being held safe at one of my properties. Until the debt is settled." "Safe?" Emily stepped forward, anger overriding her fear for a split second. "You carved a threat into my door. You threatened his life." The guards behind her stepped forward, but Luca held up a hand to stop them. He looked at Emily with a spark of genuine interest. Most people who stood before him were begging for mercy or sweating through their clothes. This woman, in her cheap coat and scrubs, was trembling violently, but she was stepping toward him, not away. "I did not carve anything," Luca said calmly. "My men left a reminder, a courtesy. Usually, we do not give warnings." "Where is he?" Emily demanded. "I want to see him. I want to know he is alive." Luca studied her. He looked at her tired eyes, the faint dark circles, the way she stood with her feet shoulder-width apart as if bracing for a physical blow. "You are a nurse," he observed. It wasn't a question. He had likely spotted the edge of her scrubs beneath the coat. "Yes," Emily said. "I am a nurse, and I know what people like you do and people like Noah. If you have hurt him, if I had hurt him, you would not be here talking to me," Luca said. "You would be identifying a body at the morgue." The blunt cruelty of the statement made Emily flinch, but she didn't look away. "I cannot pay you $50,000. Not tonight, not ever. But I will work. I will sell everything I have. Just let him go." Luca stood up. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, closing the distance between them until he was looming over her. He smelled of sandalwood and cold rain. "I do not need your furniture or your car," Luca said softly. He looked down at her, his gaze dissecting her. "But I do have a need for someone with your particular skill set." Emily stared at him, confused. "My skill set?" "My organization," Luca began, choosing his words carefully, "often requires medical attention that cannot be found in a public hospital. Gunshot wounds, lacerations, things that raise questions we prefer not to answer. I need a private nurse, someone on call, someone discreet." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed her face. "And," he continued, "I currently have a need for a companion. The other families are circling. They think I am weak because I am currently unmarried and without an heir. I need a woman to be seen with me, someone who looks innocent enough to soften my image, but brave enough not to run when things get difficult." He took another step closer. Emily had to crane her neck to look him in the eye. You want me to work for you? She asked, incredulous. And pretend to be your girlfriend? You will work off your brother's debt, Luca said. Every shift you work in my private clinic, every dinner you attend on my arm, deducts from the total. In exchange, Noah remains alive and unharmed. He stays in my custody until the debt is paid in full. If you try to run, or if you go to the police, the deal is void. Emily felt the room spinning. It was madness. It was a deal with the devil. But she thought of Noah, stupid, reckless Noah, and the terror she had felt seeing that carving on the door. She swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry as dust. I don't have a choice, do I? There is always a choice. Emily, Luca said. You can walk out that door right now, but Noah stays. Emily looked at his hands. They were large, capable of violence, yet resting casually at his sides. She looked at his face, searching for any sign of humanity. I am scared of you, she admitted. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. It was the truth. It was the only thing she could offer him. I am terrified of who you are and what you can do. Luca went still. His expression shifted, the cold mask cracking just a fraction. He looked at her not as a pawn, but as something rare. Most people lied to him. They feigned bravado or groveled in false respect. She just gave him the raw, bleeding truth. I know, Luca said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate, a secret shared in the crowded room. And yet, you are still standing here. I need to know Noah is safe, she whispered. You have my word, Luca said. Do we have a deal? The silence stretched, heavy and thick. Emily looked at the exit sign glowing red in the distance. It looked like a warning. Then she looked back at Luca. Yes, she said. Her voice cracked, fracturing under the weight of the decision. I agree. Luca stepped into her personal space. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he was going to grab her throat instead. His hand hovered near her shoulder, not touching, just existing in her space. He lowered his head until his lips were inches from her ear. I do not want your fear, Emily, he murmured. The sound of her name on his lips sent a shiver racing down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I only want your honesty. You give me that, and I will be careful with you. He pulled back, looking her in the eyes with intense seriousness. I will be gentle, he promised, his voice dark and velvety, until you are not. Emily trembled, trapped in the orbit of his dark eyes. She had walked into the inferno to save her brother, but as Luca signaled for his men to escort her, she realized she might have just sold her own soul to the fire. Report to the address my driver gives you tomorrow night at 7, Luca said, turning his back on her to look out over the club once more. Do not be late, Nurse Carter. Emily turned and walked toward the stairs, her legs feeling like lead. She didn't look back, but she could feel his gaze burning into her back until she disappeared into the shadows of the stairwell. The music swallowed her up again, but the silence of his promise rang louder in her ears than the bass ever could. The elevator that led to the penthouse clinic moved in absolute silence. It was a sleek, silver box that felt less like a transport mechanism and more like an airlock separating the chaotic streets of Eastbridge from the rarefied, dangerous air that Luca Moretti breathed. Emily Carter smoothed the front of her scrubs, her hands trembling slightly before she clenched them into fists at her sides. It had been 1 week since she had walked into the inferno. 1 week since she had sold her time to the devil to keep her brother breathing. The clinic doors slid open, revealing a facility that rivaled the best private hospitals in the state. The floors were polished marble, the walls a calming dove gray, and the equipment state-of-the-art. But unlike a hospital, there were no waiting families, no flowers, and no intercom announcements. There was only the low hum of ventilation and the occasional groan of a man in pain. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. 3 beds were occupied. These were Luca's soldiers, men who had paid the price for the family's business dealings in blood and bone. She moved to the first bed, where a man named Marco sat stoically while she checked the dressing on a knife wound across his forearm. "This is healing well," Emily said, her voice professional and detached. She kept her focus entirely on the wound, avoiding Marco's eyes. "You need to keep it dry for another 2 days." "Thanks, Doc," Marco grunted. "I am a nurse," Emily corrected automatically. "To us, you are the doc." A deep voice came from the doorway. Emily stiffened. She did not need to turn around to know who was standing there. Luca Moretti had a habit of appearing without sound, a predator materializing from the ether. She finished taping the gauze before turning to face him. He was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle. He looked out of place in the sterile environment, too dark and too vibrant for the clinical whiteness. "Mr. Moretti," Emily said, "I did not know you were scheduled for a checkup." "I own the building." "Emily," Luca said, a faint, teasing smirk playing on his lips. "I do not need an appointment to inspect my investments, and please, I told you to call me Luca." "I prefer to keep things professional," she replied, moving to the sink to wash her hands. She could feel his eyes on her back. It was a physical sensation, like the prickle of heat before a sunburn. "Is that why you wear those shapeless scrubs?" Luca asked, pushing off the doorframe and walking into the room. The air seemed to grow thinner as he approached. "To remind me that you are here to work, not to be looked at? I wear them because blood is hard to get out of silk," Emily said sharply, drying her hands with a paper towel. Luca chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. He stopped a few feet away from her, invading her personal space just enough to make her heart stutter. "You have a sharp tongue. Emily, I like it. It tells me you are fighting back." "I'm just doing my job," she said, clutching the paper towel like a lifeline. "And you are doing it well," Luca said, his tone shifting from teasing to serious. "Marco tells me you are gentler than the old doctor we used to hire. He had shaky hands. You do not—" "My hands shake all the time," Emily admitted, looking down at her fingers. "Only when you are not working," Luca observed. He took a step closer, forcing her to look up at him. "When you are stitching flesh, you are steady as a rock. It is fascinating to watch." Emily felt a flush rise to her cheeks. He had been watching her. She had felt it over the last few days, a shadow in the hallway, a presence in the observation room. He was testing her, circling her, trying to figure out where her breaking point was. Before she could respond, the calm of the clinic was shattered. The elevator doors burst open, and 2 men rushed in, supporting a 3rd man between them. The injured man was pale, his face slick with sweat, his gray suit stained dark red at the abdomen. "Boss!" one of the men shouted. "It went bad. Ambush!" Luca's demeanor changed instantly. The teasing arrogance vanished, replaced by cold, lethal command. "Get him on the trauma bed, now!" Emily snapped into motion. The fear that usually hovered at the back of her mind was shoved aside by adrenaline and training. She ran to the trauma bay, snapping on fresh gloves. "What hit him?" she demanded, cutting open the man's shirt. "Small caliber," one of the men panted. "Gut shot." The wound was ugly, oozing dark blood. The patient, a young man named Silvio, who couldn't be older than 25, groaned and thrashed. "Hold him down," Emily ordered. She grabbed a pressure pad and pressed it hard against the wound. Silvio screamed. "BP is dropping," she called out, glancing at the monitor she had hooked up. "I need fluids. He's going into shock." She reached for the IV line, but her hands were slippery with blood. The adrenaline that had fueled her suddenly spiked into panic. The reality of where she was crashed in. This wasn't a hospital with security guards and protocols. This was a Mafia penthouse. And if this man died, it wasn't just a mortality statistic. It was a failure to the most dangerous man in the city. Her hand shook violently as she tried to insert the needle. She missed the vein. "Damn it," she whispered, her breath hitching. "Easy," a voice murmured right beside her ear. A large, warm hand covered hers. Luca was there. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the patient, but his hand was firm over hers, steadying the tremor. His grip was iron strong, grounding her. "Find the line. Emily," Luca said. His voice was not a shout. It was calm, an anchor in the storm. "You know how to do this. Just breathe." His touch burned, but it stopped the shaking. Emily took a ragged breath, focused her eyes, and guided the needle true. Flash of blood. She was in. "I am in," she said. "Start the fluids." Luca released her hand instantly and moved to hang the saline bag himself, following her unspoken command. For the next hour, they worked in tandem. Emily barked orders, sutures, clamps, gauze, and Luca or his men obeyed without question. She wasn't the scared girl from the nightclub anymore. She was the authority in the room. By the time Silvio was stable, sleeping fitfully with a drain in place, Emily's scrub top was soaked with sweat and blood. She stripped off her gloves and walked stiffly into the supply room. As soon as the door clicked shut, the adrenaline crashed. The walls of the small room seemed to rush inward. The smell of latex and rubbing alcohol became suffocating. Emily slumped against the metal shelving unit, gasping for air. Her chest felt tight, constricted by invisible bands. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, burying her face in her arms. "I can't do this. I can't be here." The door opened. She didn't look up, but she knew the cadence of the footsteps. "Go away," she choked out. Luca didn't leave. He closed the door, shutting out the rest of the clinic. He didn't come close, staying near the entrance, giving her the space she desperately needed. "Breathe, Emily," he said softly. "In through your nose, hold it, out through your mouth." "I can't," she gasped. "You can," he countered, his voice steady and hypnotic. "You just saved a man's life. You did the hard part. This is just the aftershock. Listen to my voice. In 1, 2, 3. Emily latched onto his voice. It was the only steady thing in her spinning world. She forced herself to inhale, counting with him. Slowly. The black spots dancing in her vision faded. The walls stopped moving. She lifted her head. Luca was watching her, his expression unreadable but devoid of judgment. He held a bottle of water in his hand. He stepped forward slowly, telegraphing his movements, and placed the bottle on the floor next to her. "Drink," he said. Emily opened the bottle with trembling fingers and took a sip. The cold water shocked her system back to the present. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am supposed to be professional." "You are human," Luca said. He crouched down, not too close, balancing on the balls of his feet. "You are reacting to an insane situation. If you were not scared, I would be worried." He reached out. His hand moved slowly, giving her ample time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a loose strand of hair that had escaped her ponytail away from her damp forehead. His fingertips lingered for a heartbeat, hovering just millimeters from her cheek. Emily flinched. It was a reflex, a sharp jerk of her head. Luca froze. His hand remained suspended in the air. He didn't look offended. He looked thoughtful, his dark eyes searching hers. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," Emily said, though her heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked at his hand, large, scarred, capable of ending life, yet holding back with such precise control. "I know." She didn't lean into his touch, but she didn't pull away further. For a second, the air between them was charged with something confused and heavy, fear tangling with a strange, magnetic pull she didn't want to name. Luca dropped his hand. "Go clean up. We have dinner at 8. "Dinner?" Emily blinked, the whiplash of his world catching her off guard. "Councilman Evans?" Luca said, standing up and smoothing his shirt. "He's expecting me, and he is expecting a date. You are it." 3 hours later, Emily felt like she was wearing a costume. The dress Luca had provided was a deep emerald green, silk that draped over her curves like liquid water. It was modest in cut, but expensive in a way that screamed power. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup done by a woman who had arrived and left in 15 minutes. She sat in the passenger seat of Luca's black sedan as they glided through the city streets. Luca drove himself tonight, dismissing his driver. He wore a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and utterly dangerous. "Remember," Luca said, his eyes on the road, "Evans is greedy, but he is skittish. He needs to believe I am settling down, that I am becoming respectable. So I am a prop, Emily said, staring out the window. "You are a shield," Luca corrected. "A beautiful one." The restaurant was the kind of place where the menus had no prices. They were led to a private corner booth. Councilman Evans was already there, a sweating man with a comb-over and a nervous smile. "Luca!" Evans exclaimed, half rising. "And this must be the lovely lady I have heard rumors about." "This is Emily," Luca said, sliding into the booth and gesturing for Emily to sit. As she sat, Luca positioned himself close to her. Too close. His arm extended along the back of the booth behind her, effectively bracketing her in. It was a possessive gesture, marking her as his territory. "A pleasure, my dear," Evans said, eyeing her with a lecherous grin that made Emily's skin crawl. "The pleasure is mine. Councilman?" Emily recited the lines Luca had given her, forcing a smile. Throughout the meal, Luca played the role of the devoted partner perfectly. He filled her wine glass, asked her opinion on the food, and laughed softly at her comments. But underneath the table, the tension was wire-tight. "Watch his left hand," Luca whispered in her ear while pretending to point out something on the dessert menu. His breath was warm against the sensitive skin of her neck, sending a jolt of electricity straight to her core. "He taps the table when he is lying." Emily stiffened, feeling the solid weight of Luca's chest against her shoulder. The heat of him was overwhelming. "He's asking about the waterfront permits," Luca murmured, his lips brushing her earlobe. "Smile at him, Emily. Distract him while I dissect him." Emily turned her head slightly, finding Luca's face inches from hers. His eyes were dark, intense, focused entirely on the game, yet the way his hand on her back applied a subtle, reassuring pressure made her breath catch. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was an awareness of him as a man, a powerful force that was currently wrapped around her. She forced herself to look at Evans and smile. The councilman faltered in his speech. Distracted, Luca smirked. The drive back was quiet. The city lights blurred past. Emily kicked off her heels, curling her toes into the plush floor mats. She was exhausted, emotionally drained from performing. Suddenly, a car from the adjacent lane swerved violently, cutting them off. Luca slammed on the brakes. The sedan screeched, tires biting into the asphalt as the car jerked to a halt inches from the other vehicle's bumper. Emily didn't scream. She didn't brace her hands against the dashboard. Instead, she curled inward instantly, throwing her arms over her head and tucking her chin to her chest, making herself as small as possible. It was a practiced motion, a reflex honed by fear. Silence filled the car. The other driver sped off, honking. Luca didn't start driving again. He unbuckled his seatbelt and turned toward her. "Emily," he said. His voice was different. The smooth, charming mask was gone. This was raw. Emily slowly lowered her arms. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. She looked at Luca and saw him staring at her, his jaw tight. "That was not a reaction to a car accident," Luca stated. "It wasn't a question." "Who taught you to cover your head like that?" Emily looked away, staring at the glove compartment. The shame was a cold stone in her stomach. "It was a long time ago." "Who?" Luca demanded. The word was a growl. "My ex-boyfriend," Emily whispered. He didn't like it when things went wrong. If he was driving and someone cut him off, it was my fault. If he had a bad day at work, it was my fault. I learned to make myself small. It was safer." She felt tears prick her eyes, hating her vulnerability. "That is why I told you I am scared of controlling men. I swore I would never let anyone own me again. And now you are with me," Luca finished. "You bought me," she said bitterly. "You own my debt. You control where I go, what I wear, who I talk to. You are him, just with more money." "Look at me," Luca commanded. Emily refused. "Emily, look at me." She turned her head. Luca's face was fierce, his eyes blazing with a cold fire that should have terrified her. But strangely, it didn't feel directed at her. It felt like it was for her. "I am a criminal," Luca said, his voice low and intense. "I have killed men. I have stolen. I have broken laws you do not even know exist. But I am not him." He reached out but stopped inches from her face, waiting. "I do not hit women," Luca said, "and I certainly do not punish them for the sins of others. You are under my protection. Emily, that includes protection from me. He held her gaze, his expression solemn. I will never touch you without your consent, he vowed. I will never raise a hand to you. You have the debt. Yes, but your body, your mind, those are yours. I do not want a prisoner in my bed. I want... He stopped, cutting himself off. You want what? Emily asked softly. I want you to stop flinching, Mo, he said simply. He turned back to the steering wheel, his knuckles white as he gripped the leather. We are going home. The penthouse was silent when they returned. Emily went to the guest room, but sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the blood on Silvio's stomach, felt the phantom pressure of Luca's hand on her back, heard the screech of tires. At 2 a.m, she gave up. She pulled on a silk robe over her pajamas and walked out to the expansive terrace that overlooked the city. The wind was cool, whipping her hair around her face. Eastbridge sprawled below them, a grid of lights and shadows. Couldn't sleep? Emily jumped. Luca was sitting in a lounge chair in the corner of the balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had discarded his jacket and tie, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. No, Emily said. She hugged her arms around herself. Too quiet. Come, Luca said, gesturing to the chair beside him. Emily hesitated, then walked over and sat down. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the city breathe. It looks peaceful from up here, Emily said. It is a lie, Luca replied. Down there, it is chaos. Up here, it is just lights. He set his glass down on the small table between them. He turned his hand palm up on the armrest of his chair. It was an invitation, a question. Emily looked at his hand. It was the hand that had steadied her when she was failing, the hand that had protected her from the crowd, the hand that had promised never to hurt her. Slowly, tentatively, she reached out. She placed her hand in his. Luca didn't grab her. He didn't pull. He waited. May I? He asked softly, looking at her face. Emily nodded, her throat tight. Luca slowly curled his fingers around hers. He slid his fingers between hers, interlacing them. His skin was warm, his grip firm but gentle. He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles, a soothing, repetitive motion. It was such a small thing, just holding hands, but in the cool night air, with the city stretching out below them, it felt like the most intimate thing that had ever happened to her. See, Luca whispered, his voice rough with something she couldn't place. I can be gentle. Emily looked at their joined hands. For the first time since this nightmare began, the knot of fear in her chest loosened. Just a little. She didn't pull away. She squeezed his hand back. I see, she admitted. And as they sat there, hand in hand under the starlight, Emily realized with a terrifying jolt that she wasn't just scared of him anymore. She was scared of how safe she felt sitting right beside him. The air in the Moretti penthouse had changed. It was no longer just the cold, sterile atmosphere of a command center. There was a new, fragile warmth that seemed to radiate from wherever Emily was. She had placed a vase of wildflowers on the reception desk of the clinic, a splash of chaotic color against the gray marble. She hummed quietly while restocking supplies. She had even caught Luca smiling, a genuine, unguarded expression, when she made a sarcastic comment about his coffee addiction. But not everyone welcomed the thaw. Matteo, Luca's second in command, watched Emily with the cold, unblinking stare of a reptile. He was a man built of sharp angles and blind loyalty, born into the life, molded by its brutal codes, to him. Emily was not a guest or an employee. She was a crack in the foundation. She is a liability, Luca, Matteo said one morning, standing in Luca's office while Emily was busy in the clinic down the hall. His voice was low, a rasp of irritation. You are spending too much time playing doctor. The Koval family is moving shipments through the docks, and you are worried about whether the nurse has had lunch. Luca did not look up from the files on his desk. She has a name, Matteo. She has a target on her back, Matteo countered, slamming a hand on the mahogany surface. And now, so do you. You hesitate when she is in the room. You leave meetings early. Softness gets men killed. Luca, You know this better than anyone. Luca finally looked up, his eyes hard. Emily is here because she is paying a debt. She is under my protection. If you question my judgment again, Matteo, you will find yourself guarding a warehouse in the middle of nowhere. Do I make myself clear? Matteo stiffened, his jaw tightening. Crystal clear, boss. He turned and left. But as he passed Emily in the hallway, he didn't acknowledge her greeting. He simply brushed past, his shoulder checking hers hard enough to make her stumble. When she looked back, his eyes were filled with a dark, simmering resentment that made her shiver. 2 days later, Luca made good on a promise. He arranged for Emily to see Noah. The drive took them out of the city, away from the smog and the sirens, into the rolling hills of the countryside. The safe house was a nondescript farmhouse at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by dense woods. When Emily saw Noah sitting on the porch, flanked by 2 guards, she didn't wait for the car to stop completely. She scrambled out, her shoes crunching on the gravel, and threw her arms around him. "Noah!" she cried, burying her face in his neck. He felt thinner, his frame trembling slightly, but he was whole. "Are you okay? Have they hurt you?" Noah clung to her, his grip desperate. "I am okay, Em. I am okay." Luca stood back by the car, leaning against the hood, watching them with a stoic expression. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the gray sky, giving them space. "They told me you owed them 50,000, Emily whispered, pulling back to look at her brother's face. "They told me you stole—" Noah looked down, shame coloring his cheeks. "It is not that simple. Em, I didn't just lose the money. The Koval syndicate, they approached me. They knew I was working the warehouse. They told me if I didn't let their trucks through, they would come for you." Emily froze. "For me?" "I tried to pay them off with Moretti money," Noah confessed, his voice shaking. "I thought I could fix it, but I got caught. Luca. He didn't just kidnap me over the debt. He found out the Kovals were planning to kill me to tie up loose ends once I served my purpose. He pulled me out of my apartment 10 minutes before a hit squad kicked in the door." Emily stared at her brother, her world tilting on its axis. She turned her head slowly to look at Luca. He was watching the tree line, his profile sharp and unyielding. He hadn't told her he saved Noah's life. He had let her believe he was the villain, simply enforcing a debt. "You have to trust him. Em," Noah begged, grabbing her hands. "I know he is scary. I know who he is. But the people he is fighting, they are monsters. Luca is the only reason I am breathing." The visit was too short. When the guards signaled it was time to leave, Emily hugged Noah one last time, tears streaming down her face. She walked back to the car, her steps heavy. Luca opened the door for her. He didn't say a word, but as she slid into the leather seat, he caught her eye. There was no triumph in his gaze, only a quiet resolve. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily asked as the convoy of 3 black SUVs pulled onto the main road. Luca watched the rearview mirror. "Would you have believed me?" "I don't know," Emily admitted softly. "It does not matter," Luca said. "He is safe. That is what matters." They drove in silence for 20 minutes. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the road. The peace of the countryside felt deceptive, a thin veneer over a violent world. Then the world exploded. The lead SUV suddenly erupted in a ball of fire, the concussion wave shaking their vehicle. The driver of Luca's car slammed on the brakes, swerving to avoid the flaming wreckage. Tires screeched, metal groaned, and Emily was thrown against her seatbelt, the breath knocked out of her. "Get down!" Luca roared. Gunfire erupted from the woods, a rhythmic, terrifying pop, pop, pop that shattered the windows. Glass rained down on them like diamonds. The driver slumped forward, blood spraying the dashboard. "Move!" Luca shouted. He unbuckled his seatbelt and kicked his door open, dragging Emily with him. They tumbled onto the asphalt. The air was thick with the smell of burning rubber and cordite. Bullets sparked against the pavement inches from their heads. "Stay low," Luca commanded, pulling a handgun from his waistband with a fluid, practiced motion. He returned fire, his face a mask of concentrated rage. A black van screeched to a halt ahead of them, and men in ski masks poured out. One of them lunged for Emily, grabbing her by the collar of her coat. "No!" Emily screamed, kicking out, her hands clawing at the man's arm. She was dragged a few feet, the rough asphalt tearing at her jeans. The man was strong, pulling her toward the van. "Luca!" she shrieked. Luca turned, seeing Emily in the man's grip. Something primal snapped in his eyes. He didn't shoot. The risk of hitting her was too high. Instead, he holstered his weapon and launched himself at the attacker. He hit the man with the force of a freight train, tackling him to the ground. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the man went limp. Luca didn't stop. He grabbed Emily, hauling her up, and shoved her behind the cover of their overturned SUV. He pressed her back against the cool metal of the chassis, shielding her body with his own. Bullets hammered against the other side of the vehicle, deafeningly loud. Emily was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She buried her face in Luca's chest, gripping the lapels of his jacket. "Look at me," Luca ordered. His voice was a low growl, vibrating through his chest and into hers. Emily looked up. His face was smeared with soot, his eyes wild but focused entirely on her. "I have you," he promised, his voice fierce. "Do you hear me? No one takes you, not while I am breathing." He pulled a radio from his belt. "Mateo, flank right, clear the ridge," he barked orders, his mind working 3 steps ahead of the chaos. Emily could feel his heart pounding against her back as he shifted, keeping himself between her and the line of fire. It wasn't the frantic beat of panic. It was the powerful, driving rhythm of a war drum. He was a fortress, in the middle of hell. He was the only safe place. The firefight lasted another 5 minutes, but it felt like 5 years. Finally, the shooting stopped. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not police, but the distinctive horn of the Moretti backup crew. "It is over," Luca said, his voice dropping. He didn't let her go. He held her tight, his hand cupping the back of her head, pressing her face into his neck. "It is over." The backup team didn't take them back to the penthouse. The route was too compromised. Instead, they were driven to a small, nondescript safe house in the industrial district, a converted loft above an old textile factory. The room was dimly lit, smelling of dust and old wood. The adrenaline was fading, leaving Emily cold and trembling. She sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, hugging herself. There was blood on her cheek, a small cut from the flying glass. Luca paced the room, barking orders into his phone, arranging for the cleanup, the cover story, the retaliation. Then he hung up and turned to her. The anger drained out of his posture the moment he saw her shaking. He walked over to the small sink in the corner, wet a cloth, and came to stand between her knees. "You are bleeding," he said softly. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly. It was the first time she had seen his composure crack. The man who had tackled a gunman without hesitation was now shaking as he touched her. He wiped the blood from her cheek with his thumb, his touch agonizingly gentle. "I'm sorry," Luca rasped. "I should have anticipated the route. I should have known." "You saved me," Emily whispered. She looked at the blood on the cloth, her blood, mixed with the grime of the road. "You threw yourself in front of me. I told you I would be careful with you," Luca said, his voice thick with emotion. "This was not careful. You could have died," Emily said. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The thought of him bleeding out on the asphalt made her chest ache with a sudden, sharp intensity. "They could have killed you. That is the life." "Emily," Luca said, pulling back, his face closing off. "That is the reality, and it is why you should hate me. You should be running for the door." "I can't," she said. "Why?" Luca demanded. "Because of the debt? To hell with the debt. Noah is safe. You can go." "No." Emily stood up, closing the distance between them. "I can't go because I am terrified." "Good," Luca said bitterly. "You should be scared of me." "I am not scared of you anymore," Emily cried out, the truth tearing itself from her throat. "I am scared of losing you. When I saw that man grab me, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking that if they killed you, I wouldn't know how to survive it." The confession hung in the air, raw and exposed. Luca stared at her, stunned. The silence stretched. charged with the energy of the gunfight, the fear, and the undeniable pull that had been building between them for weeks. They stood chest to chest, breathing the same air. "Do not say that," Luca whispered, his voice rough. "Do not look at me like I am a hero. I am a monster. Emily, I am the man who brings the war to your doorstep." "I don't see a monster," Emily said, her voice shaking. She reached up, her hand hovering before she placed it gently on his chest, right over his heart. "I see the man who shielded me with his body. I see the man who saved my brother." Luca looked down at her hand, then back up to her eyes. His resistance crumbled, the walls he had built, the professionalism, the distance, the warning, shattered under the weight of her gaze. He leaned in slowly. He gave her every second to push him away. He telegraphed his intent, his eyes dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes, asking a silent question. Emily didn't move away. She tilted her chin up, her breath hitching. "Luca," she breathed. He closed the gap. The kiss wasn't violent. It wasn't the kiss of a mafia boss claiming a prize. It was careful. It was soft, lingering, and achingly patient. His lips moved against hers with a reverence that made her knees weak. His hands came up to rest lightly on her waist, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. Emily's hands found purchase on his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists, pulling him closer. She opened to him, and the kiss deepened, shifting from tentative to passionate. It tasted of danger and salvation. It was the release of weeks of terror and confusion, pouring into a singular moment of connection. Emily felt a sound vibrate in his throat, a low groan of want that sparked a fire in her belly. Her fear didn't vanish, but it transmuted, shifting into a heavy, aching desire. She wanted him closer. She wanted the safety of his arms and the danger of his world all at once. Luca broke the kiss first. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His breathing was ragged, his chest heaving against hers. "Emily," he whispered. His voice was wrecked, rough with restraint. "Stop me." "I don't want to," she murmured, her eyes still closed, chasing the warmth of his mouth. "You're in shock," Luca said, though he didn't let go of her waist. "You are running on adrenaline. If I take you to that bed now, you will regret it in the morning, and I will not be the man who takes advantage of your fear." He pulled back further, putting a foot of distance between them. His eyes were black with desire, dilated and intense, but his jaw was set in a line of iron control. "I said I would be gentle," he reminded her, and himself. "I will wait until you are completely ready, until there is no adrenaline, no gunfire, just us." Emily looked at him, feeling the loss of his warmth immediately. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The safe house had only one secure room, the bedroom in the center of the loft. With reinforced walls and no windows, there was only one bed. "Take the bed," Luca said, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "I will take the floor." "No," Emily said. She looked at the floor, hard wood and cold drafts. "The bed is big enough. Please, I don't want to be alone." Luca hesitated, then nodded once. They lay down fully clothed. Luca lay on top of the covers on the left side, one arm thrown over his eyes, his gun on the nightstand within easy reach. Emily lay on the right, under the thin quilt. The room was pitch black, save for the thin line of light under the door. Emily turned on her side, watching Luca's profile in the shadows. He was still, breathing deeply, but she knew he wasn't asleep. He was listening, guarding, waiting. She traced the line of his nose, the sharp cut of his jaw, with her eyes. A few weeks ago, this man had been a nightmare, a name whispered in fear. Now, lying inches away from him, knowing he would wake and kill for her before she even realized there was a threat. She felt a shifting in her soul. It wasn't just safety she wanted from him anymore. She remembered the taste of his kiss, the heat of his hands. She wanted the fire. She wanted the man who had looked at her in the middle of a gunfight and promised her forever. "Luca," she whispered into the dark. "Go to sleep, Emily," he replied, his voice rough and low. "I am right here. I know," she said softly. She closed her eyes, her hand drifting across the mattress until her pinky finger just barely brushed against his arm. He didn't pull away, as sleep finally claimed her. Emily realized with terrifying clarity that the danger outside was nothing compared to the danger of falling in love with Luca Moretti, and she was already falling fast. The penthouse, which had once felt like a sanctuary high above the smog and noise of Eastbridge, had transformed into a gilded cage. The air inside was recycled and cool, filtered to perfection, but to Emily Carter, it tasted stale. It had been 3 days since the ambush on the rural road, 3 days since Luca Moretti had shielded her body with his own and declared war on the shadows reaching for them. Since their return, the world had shrunk. Luca had locked down his operation with a paranoia that bordered on obsession. Emily was no longer allowed to walk to the corner store, let alone take a shift at the hospital. Her world was now the marble floors of the penthouse, the sterile white of the private clinic, and the constant, silent presence of Lena. Lena was a new addition to the payroll, assigned specifically to Emily. She was a woman of indeterminate age with hair cut short and practical, eyes that missed nothing, and a blazer that did a poor job of concealing the holster beneath her left arm. Lena did not make small talk. She did not smile. She simply existed 3 feet behind Emily at all times, a human shadow designed to intercept bullets. "I just want to go to the balcony," Emily said, standing by the glass doors, her hand hovering over the handle. "Mr. Moretti said no outdoor exposure during daylight hours," Lena replied. Her voice was flat, devoid of sympathy. "Snipers, Miss Carter." Emily let her hand drop. She felt protected. Yes, no one could touch her here. But she also felt like she was drowning. The walls were closing in, and every time the elevator chimed, her heart hammered against her ribs, expecting bad news. The tension was not just confined to Emily, the entire organization was vibrating with it. Rumors of a full-scale war with the Koval Syndicate were no longer whispers. They were shouted orders in the hallway and the metallic click of magazines being loaded in the armory. But there was a poison spreading through the ranks that was far more dangerous than the external threat. Victor, the head of the Koval family, was playing a psychological game. He had not just tried to kill them, he was trying to rot the Moretti Empire from the inside. False intelligence had begun to circulate, digitally altered transcripts, faked bank transfers, and whispers planted in low-level bars, suggesting that the ambush had been a setup. The narrative Victor was spinning was simple and devastating. Emily Carter was not a victim. She was a mole. She was trading secrets to law enforcement or rival gangs in exchange for immunity for her and her brother. Emily felt the shift in the way Luca's men looked at her. When she walked down the hall to the clinic to organize supplies, conversations would die instantly. Men who had previously nodded at her with respect now watched her with cold, suspicious eyes. She was an outsider, a civilian, and now a potential traitor. The pressure reached its boiling point on a Tuesday afternoon. Emily was in the kitchen, trying to make tea just to have something to do with her hands, when she heard voices rising from Luca's study down the hall. The heavy oak doors were closed, but the volume was loud enough to carry through the wood. "You are blinded by her!" It was Matteo, Luca's second in command, usually as cold and composed as a statue, was shouting. Emily froze, the kettle trembling in her hand. She set it down and took a step toward the hallway, Lena trailing silently behind her. "She is a civilian nurse. Luca," Matteo's voice was ragged with frustration. "Suddenly we get hit on a secure route. Suddenly Victor knows where we are moving product, and you think it is a coincidence. The timing lines up perfectly with her arrival. Be careful, Matteo." Luca's voice was lower, a dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "You are speaking about a woman under my protection. I am speaking about a liability," Matteo yelled. "Victor released the logs this morning. Encrypted messages sent from a device registered to the clinic. She is playing you. She is terrified of you, remember? A scared animal bites. She's selling us out to save her brother and herself." "The logs are faked," Luca said, his voice icy. "How do you know?" Matteo demanded. "Because she has pretty eyes. because she cries when things get loud. You are risking the lives of 50 men for a girl who would turn you into the FBI in a heartbeat if they offered her a way out." There was a heavy pause, charged with violence. "She stays," Luca said. The finality in his tone was absolute. "Then you are a fool," Matteo spat out, "and you will bury this family." Crack. The sound was like a gunshot, but heavier. It was the sound of a fist slamming into solid plaster with the force of a sledgehammer. Emily flinched so hard she stumbled back against the wall. The sudden, violent noise triggered a memory she thought she had buried. The sound of a door being kicked in. The crash of a plate against the wall. The shouting of an ex-boyfriend who used fear as a currency. Her breath hitched in her throat, and her hands flew up to cover her mouth. The door to the study flew open. Matteo stormed out, his face red with fury. He saw Emily standing there, pressed against the wall, pale and shaking. He didn't say a word. He just glared at her with pure, unadulterated hatred and marched toward the elevator. Luca appeared in the doorway a second later. He looked terrifying. His chest was heaving, his hair disheveled, and his right hand, the one he had driven into the wall, was clenched in a tight fist at his side. The plaster next to the doorframe was shattered, a spiderweb of cracks radiating from a dent that was the exact size of his knuckles. He saw Emily. The rage on his face didn't vanish instantly. It took a moment to recede, like a tide going out. He took a step toward her, his movement sharp and aggressive from the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Emily," he said, his voice still loud, still carrying the edge of the argument. "Go back to your room." Emily didn't move. She couldn't. Her feet were rooted to the floor. She was staring at his hand, then at the hole in the wall, then at his eyes. She was back in that apartment 3 years ago. She was small. She was trapped. "Emily?" Luca took another step, reaching out as if to guide her away. "Don't!" she gasped, shrinking away from him. Her back hit the wall. "Don't come near me." Luca froze. The sight of her flinching, actually recoiling from him as if he were about to strike her, stopped him dead. The red haze of anger evaporated, leaving him cold. "Emily," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He held up his hands, palms open. I was not going to touch you." "You hit the wall," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "You were screaming." "I was arguing with Matteo," Luca said, slowly lowering his hands. "It had nothing to do with you." "Well, it did. But it is the violence," Emily interrupted, her voice gaining a tremulous strength. "It is the sudden noise, the rage. I told you. Luca, I told you I can't handle it. When you get like that, I don't see you. I see him." Luca looked at the dent in the wall, then back at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not the wary respect she usually gave him, but visceral, animal fear. He had promised to be careful with her. He had promised to be gentle. And here he was, looming over her with bruised knuckles, looking like every monster she had ever feared. "I am sorry," he said. The words were stark. "I lost control. I need to breathe," Emily choked out. "I can't be in this hallway." "Okay," Luca said immediately. He backed away, putting 10 feet of distance between them. "Okay, go. Go to the clinic. Go to your room, anywhere you feel safe. I will stay here." Emily hurried past him, giving him a wide berth. As she turned the corner, she glanced back. Luca was standing alone in the hallway, staring at his own hand with a look of profound self-loathing. 2 hours later, Lena knocked on Emily's door. "Pack a bag," Lena said. "Small, for 3 days. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, wiping her eyes. "Mr. Moretti says we are disappearing." Lena replied, "They took a helicopter. It was waiting on the roof, the rotors chopping the air with a deafening rhythm. Luca was already inside, wearing dark sunglasses and a headset. He helped her in, his grip firm but careful, ensuring his fingers didn't press too hard. They flew east, away from the city, away from the impending war. They landed on a private pad near the coast, where a sleek, black car was waiting. The drive was short. They arrived at a house made of glass and weathered timber, perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was isolated, Surrounded by dunes and tall grass, there were no other houses in sight, no sirens, no city hum, just the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below and the cry of seagulls. "The security system here is independent," Lucas said as he unlocked the front door. "No internet lines, no digital footprint. Victor can't track us here, and Mateo doesn't know this place exists." He held the door open for her. "Just us?" Emily asked, stepping into the expansive, light-filled living room. "And Lena, patrolling the perimeter," Lucas said. "But inside, just us." The change in atmosphere was immediate. The beach house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a home. The tension that had been knotting Emily's shoulders for days began to loosen. For the next 2 days, they existed in a bubble. Luca put his phone in a drawer and didn't look at it. He wore soft sweaters instead of suits. He cooked, actually cooked, making a complex pasta sauce from scratch while Emily sat at the kitchen island, drinking wine and watching him. It was on the second evening that the dynamic shifted. They had finished dinner and were sitting on the deck, wrapped in blankets against the cool ocean breeze. The sun had set, leaving a bruised purple horizon. A fire crackled in the outdoor hearth, casting flickering orange light over Luca's face. He looked younger here. The lines of stress around his eyes had smoothed out. He was watching the fire, lost in thought. Emily set her wineglass down. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man who had pulled her brother out of a death trap. The man who had taken a bullet for her. The man who had backed away in the hallway the moment he realized she was scared. She stood up and walked over to his chair. Luca looked up, his expression unreadable. Emily stepped between his knees. It was a bold move, one that made her heart race, but she didn't stop. She reached out and took his right hand, the one that had punched the wall. The knuckles were bruised, the skin slightly split. She brought his hand to her chest, pressing his palm flat against her heart. She knew he could feel it hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Emily?" Luca whispered. "I'm still scared," she admitted, her voice trembling in the wind. "I am scared of your world. I am scared of the guns and the shouting. But—" She leaned down, her face inches from his. "But I think I am done running from you." Luca went very still. "You should run," he murmured. "I am not a good man. Emily, I don't need a good man," she whispered. "I need you." Something broke in Luca's eyes. A dam holding back weeks of restraint gave way, but he didn't lunge. He didn't grab. He moved with agonizing, deliberate slowness. He lifted his free hand and traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. His skin was rough, calloused from violence, but his touch was feather-light. He mapped the curve of her cheekbone, the softness of her earlobe, treating her as if she were made of porcelain that would shatter at the slightest pressure. "Tell me to stop," Lucas said, his voice a low vibration. "Tell me to stop, and I will walk away right now." "Don't stop," Emily breathed. He leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the safe house, desperate and fueled by adrenaline. This was slow. It was a question asked and answered in the silence of the coast. His lips moved against hers with a lingering, unhurried pressure, tasting the wine and the salt air on her skin. Emily made a small sound in the back of her throat and tangled her fingers in his hair. Luca groaned low in his chest and stood up, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in the crook of his neck, inhaling the scent of wood smoke and him. He carried her inside, kicking the glass door shut behind them. He didn't take her to the bedroom. He couldn't make it that far. He lowered her gently onto the oversized plush sofa in the living room, illuminated only by the dying fire outside. Luca hovered over her, his weight supported on his forearms so he wouldn't crush her. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and dilated, scanning her face for any sign of panic. "I am right here," he whispered. "Nowhere else." He kissed her again, deeper this time. His hands began to roam, exploring her. He didn't rush to remove clothes. Instead, his palms swept over the fabric of her sweater, mapping the curves of her waist, the arch of her hip. He touched her with a reverence that made her breath hitch. Emily arched her back, clinging to his shoulders. The fear was still there. a small cold knot in her stomach, but it was being drowned out by the heat of his body. She wanted this. She wanted to feel alive. She wanted to be claimed by the man who had promised to protect her. Luca's hand slipped under the hem of her sweater, his fingers warm against the bare skin of her stomach. He traced the line of her ribs, moving upward slowly. Emily gasped, her body instinctively reacting to the sensation. Then, Luca shifted his weight, his knee pressing between hers to get closer. It was a sudden movement, a shift in leverage. Emily stiffened. It was involuntary, a reflex born of trauma. Her muscles locked up, her breath catching in a sharp intake. Her hands, which had been pulling him closer, suddenly froze on his shoulders. Luca stopped instantly. It wasn't a gradual slowing down. It was an immediate, total cessation of movement. He froze mid-motion, his hands still resting on her ribcage. He pulled his head back, looking at her face. Her eyes were wide, darting slightly. She was breathing too fast. "Emily," he said softly. "I'm sorry," she stammered, trying to force her body to relax. "I am sorry. I didn't mean to—" "Shh," Luca soothed. He withdrew his hand from under her shirt. He shifted his weight back, moving his knee away, giving her space. "Do not apologize. I ruined it," she whispered, shame flooding her face. "You stopped." "Of course I stopped," Luca said. He rolled off her, settling onto the sofa beside her, and pulled her into a sitting position. He didn't look frustrated. He didn't look angry. He looked concerned. "I told you, Emily, I will never touch you if you are not 100% with me. Your body said no, so we stop. But I want to," she insisted, tears gathering in her lashes. "I want to be with you, and we will get there," Luca promised, brushing a tear from her cheek. "But not tonight. Tonight, the fear won out, and that is okay. We have time." He pulled a throw blanket from the back of the sofa and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he lay back down, opening his arms. "Come here," he said. Emily hesitated, then curled into his side. She rested her head on his chest, right over his heart. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her securely, a human shield against her own memories. There was no awkwardness, no resentment, just the steady, rhythmic thud of his heartbeat and the warmth of his body seeping into hers. "Sleep," Luca murmured into her hair. "I have got you," as Emily drifted off, listening to the ocean and the steady breathing of the man holding her. She realized he had just passed a test she hadn't even known she was giving him. He had stopped. He had listened. And for the first time in her life, she understood that her safety mattered more to him than his own desire. She fell asleep without fear, her hand resting trustingly over his heart. The illusion of peace at the beach house shattered with the shrill, jarring ring of a satellite phone. It was a sound that did not belong amongst the crying gulls and the rhythmic crashing of the Atlantic waves. It was the sound of the city, of concrete and steel, reaching out to drag them back. Luca Moretti was standing on the deck, staring out at the gray horizon. When the phone buzzed against the wood of the railing where he had left it, he picked it up, his face hardening instantly, the relaxed lines around his eyes vanishing as if they had never existed. Emily, who'd been reading inside with a mug of coffee in her hands, saw the shift through the glass doors. She saw his shoulders tense, his spine straighten into a rod of iron. She set her mug down, a cold knot forming in her stomach. The dream was over. Luca listened for a minute, saying nothing. Then he hung up and turned to face her. His eyes were dark, devoid of the warmth that had been there only hours before. "Pack your things," he said. His voice was flat. "We are leaving. Now." "What happened?" Emily asked, rushing to slide the door open. The wind whipped her hair across her face, blinding her for a second. "The warehouse district," Lucas said, walking past her into the living room to grab his holster. "Firebombs. 3 buildings are gone. 7 of my men are dead." Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God! Luca, I am so sorry." "That is not all," Lucas said. He stopped, looking down at the gun in his hand before sliding it into the waistband of his jeans. He looked up at her, and for the first time in days, She saw a flicker of the predator she had met in the nightclub. Victor Koval sent a message, a broadcast to every family in the state. He claims he has a source inside my house. He claims he knows my movements because my nurse is whispering them to the highest bidder. Me? Emily breathed, the blood draining from her face. He's blaming me? He says if I do not surrender the port territory by midnight, he will release proof that you are a federal informant, Luca said. He is painting a target on your back. Emily. And right now, half of my organization wants to be the one to pull the trigger. The helicopter ride back to Eastbridge was a funeral procession in the sky. Luca did not hold her hand. He did not look at her. He stared out the window at the approaching skyline, his mind already fighting a war she couldn't see. When they landed on the penthouse helipad, the atmosphere was suffocating. The air was thick with tension and the smell of ozone. The men guarding the doors did not nod at Emily. They stared, their eyes were cold, assessing, stripped of the grudging respect she had earned over the last few weeks. She was no longer the woman who saved their lives in the clinic. She was the enemy within the gates. They moved quickly to the main war room. Matteo was waiting. Luca's second-in-command looked tired. His suit rumpled, but his eyes burned with a vindictive triumph as he saw Emily enter behind Luca. "I told you," Matteo said, his voice echoing in the large room. He didn't greet his boss. He threw a tablet onto the sleek conference table. It slid across the polished surface. Coming to a stop in front of Luca. "I told you she was rot." "Explain," Luca commanded, not looking at the tablet. "We scrubbed the network after the fire," Matteo said, pointing a finger at Emily. "We found outgoing transmissions, encrypted data packets sent from the clinic's secure line. Timestamps match the ambush. They match the warehouse fire. And we found this." Matteo tapped a key on his laptop. A voice filled the room. It was scratchy, distorted by static, but it was undeniably Emily's voice. "He's moving the shipment tonight. I can get you the route. Just promise me my brother walks free." The recording cut off with a sharp click. Silence descended on the room. It was heavy, absolute, and terrifying. Emily stared at the speakers, her mouth slightly open. "That is not me," she whispered. "I never said that." "It is your voice," Matteo spat. "It is your cadence. Do not insult us." "It is spliced," Emily cried. Turning to Luca, she reached out to grab his arm, but stopped herself when she saw the look on his face. "Luca, you know how I speak. You know I wouldn't do this. I have been with you." "The transmission was sent 3 days ago," Matteo interjected. "Right before you whisked her away to the beach. She set the fire before she left. Luca, she bought herself an alibi while our men burned." Luca stood motionless. He looked at the tablet. He looked at Matteo. And then, slowly, he turned his gaze to Emily. His face was a mask. The tenderness of the beach house was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating detachment of the dawn. He looked at her not as a lover, but as a variable in a dangerous equation. "My office," Luca said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than a scream. "Now." "Luca, please," Emily begged, tears pricking her eyes. "Walk," Luca ordered. Emily walked. She felt the eyes of the men burning into her back. Matteo, the guards, even the communications team, they all hated her. They all wanted her dead. She entered Luca's office, and he followed, closing the heavy oak door with a definitive thud that shut out the world. He locked it. He turned to face her. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He simply walked around his desk and leaned against the edge of it, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked massive in the dim light, a towering figure of judgment. "You have 5 minutes," Luca said. "Convince me." "It is a lie," Emily sobbed, her composure shattering. "The recording is fake. Anyone can take my voice from the clinic cameras and cut it together. You know that." "The data trail came from your login," Luca said. His voice was low, laced with a dangerous edge that made her knees weak. "The encryption key was yours." "I don't even know how to use an encryption key," Emily shouted, her hands shaking as she gestured wildly. "I am a nurse. Luca, I fix stitches. I check blood pressure. I don't know how to hack a secure line. I don't know how to route data packets." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She slammed it onto his desk. "Check it," she screamed. "Check everything, read my texts, listen to my calls, look at my location history. I have never called a federal agent. I have never called Victor Koval. The only person I have called is my landlord to beg for an extension on my rent." Luca looked at the phone, then back at her face. Her eyes were red, her chest heaving, her hands trembling violently. She looked terrified. Yes, but beneath the terror, there was a fierce, burning indignation. "You promised me," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "You promised you would know when I was lying. Look at me, Luca. Look at me and tell me you believe I killed your men." She stepped closer. Ignoring the instinct to run, she forced herself to stand her ground before the monster she had feared for so long. "I could have run at the club," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I could have run when we were ambushed. I could have let you bleed out on the asphalt. I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because I trust you. Why can't you trust me?" Luca stared at her. He watched the way her pulse hammered in her throat. He saw the raw, unfiltered honesty in her grief. A liar would be defensive. A liar would have a perfect story. Emily had nothing but her desperation and her phone. The silence stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds. Then, Luca let out a long breath. His shoulders dropped half an inch. "I know," he said softly. Emily blinked, wiping her eyes. "What?" "I know it is not you," Luca said. He picked up her phone and held it out to her. "You do not have the technical skill to bypass my firewalls, and that recording, the intonation was wrong. You stutter when you are scared. The voice on that tape was too smooth. Then why—" Emily's voice trailed off. "Why did you drag me in here? Why did you let Matteo say those things?" "Because someone in that room is lying," Luca said, his eyes turning cold again, though not directed at her. "Someone planted that data. Someone fabricated that voice. And it had to be someone with high-level access." "Matteo?" Emily whispered the name. "Maybe," Luca said. "Or maybe he is just being played like everyone else. But if I show weakness now, if I defend you blindly in front of them without proof, I lose the room, I lose the family, and then we are both dead." He walked over to his intercom and pressed a button. "Lena, my office." A moment later, the bodyguard slipped inside. "Take this," Luca said, handing Lena a flash drive he had pulled from his pocket. "This is a mirror of the server logs before Matteo scrubbed them. I need you to run a trace, not on the external hack, but on the internal upload. Find out whose terminal authorized the data packet." Lena nodded, her face impassive. "And Miss Carter?" "She is confined to quarters," Luca said loudly, for the benefit of anyone listening at the door. Then, dropping his voice, he looked at Emily. "Stay in your room. Do not open the door for anyone but Lena or myself. I have to play this part, Emily. I have to make them think I am investigating you. You're going to ignore me," Emily realized, a chill running through her. "I have to distance myself," Luca corrected. "If I am close to you, you are a target. If I push you away, they think you are already dealt with. It buys us time. It feels like you are leaving me," she whispered. "I am saving you," Luca said. He didn't touch her. He didn't reach out. He stood behind his desk, a barrier of wood and authority between them. "Go." The next 2 days were a blur of isolation and silent agony. Emily stayed in her room. Meals were brought by Lena, who checked the food for poison before allowing Emily to eat. The penthouse, usually silent, buzzed with the frenetic energy of a war room. Emily could hear heavy footsteps, shouted orders, and the constant ringing of phones whenever she ventured into the hallway to get water or just to escape the 4 walls. She would see Luca. But he wasn't her Luca. He was the Don. He walked past her with a phone pressed to his ear, his eyes sliding over her as if she were furniture. He slept in his office. He didn't come to check on her. The distance was physical, but it felt emotional. Emily knew it was a ruse. She knew he was doing it to protect her. But the doubt began to creep in. What if he changed his mind? What if Matteo convinced him? What if I am just a loose end he is waiting to cut? On the 3rd night, the city of Eastbridge plunged into darkness. It wasn't a storm. The lights didn't flicker. They simply died. The hum of the refrigerator, the air conditioning, the distant glow of the streetlights through the window, everything vanished in a single heartbeat. A massive cyber attack on the city's power grid. Victor's next move. Emily froze in the center of her room. The darkness was absolute. Then the panic set in. She couldn't see the door. She couldn't see the walls. The silence of the penthouse was suddenly oppressive. "Lena?" she called out. Her voice sounded small and terrified. There was no answer. Lena had been called away to the perimeter 5 minutes ago. Emily stumbled toward the door, her hands outstretched. She needed to find someone. She needed to find him. She opened her door and stepped into the pitch-black hallway. "Luca!" she cried out. She took 3 steps and collided with something solid. A gasp escaped her lips as strong hands grabbed her arms, steadying her. She flinched violently, pulling back, ready to scream. "It is me!" a low voice rumbled in the dark. "Luca!" Emily lunged forward, clutching the fabric of his shirt. "The lights! Everything is gone." "I know," Luca said. "Victor hit the grid. The backup generators will kick in any second." He didn't let go of her arms. In the darkness, the ruse fell away. There was no audience here. No Mateo. No cameras. Just them. "I thought you left me," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "You wouldn't look at me. You wouldn't talk to me. I had to." Luca groaned. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist, crushing her against him. "God, Emily, I hated every second of it. Watching you walk past me like a ghost. It was torture. I was so scared," she confessed, burying her face in his chest. "Not of the dark. Not of Victor. I was scared that you believed them." "Never," Luca vowed. His hand came up to tangle in her hair, holding her head against his heart. "I know who you are. You are the only clean thing in this entire city. You make me want to be better. You make me want to be less of a monster." "I don't care about the monster," Emily cried softly. "I care about the man. I am more scared of losing you than I am of anything else." The confession hung between them in the velvet darkness. Luca let out a ragged breath. He found her face with his hands, cupping her cheeks. His thumbs brushed over her eyelids, her cheekbones, her lips. "Emily," he whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate. It was the kiss of a man standing on the edge of a cliff, holding onto the only thing keeping him from falling. He kissed her like he was afraid it might be the last time he ever got the chance. Emily responded with equal fervor. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, pulling him down to her. She opened her mouth to him, tasting the desperation and the fierce, possessive love he had been hiding behind his cold mask. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Luca froze for a fraction of a second, then deepened the kiss, a groan vibrating in his chest. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of automatic gunfire erupted from the floor below. The spell shattered. The reality of their world came crashing back in with the violence of a sledgehammer. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the hallway in a sickly red glow. Luca pulled back, his eyes wild, his gun already in his hand before Emily had even registered the sound. "They are inside," Luca snarled. The blackout was cover for a breach. "Luca," Emily gasped, grabbing his arm. "Move!" Luca grabbed her hand and ran. He didn't run toward the exit. He ran deeper into the penthouse, toward the master bedroom. He kicked the door open and dragged her to the walk-in closet. He pushed aside a rack of suits to reveal a heavy steel door set into the wall. The panic room. He punched a code into the keypad. The door hissed open. "Get in," Luca ordered, shoving her gently inside. "No!" Emily grabbed the door frame. "You're coming with me." "I can't," Luca said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "If I hide, they will burn this building down to find us. I have to lead them away. I have to hold the line." "You will die," she screamed. "Please, Luca, just get in." "I won't die," Luca said. He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a fierce resolve. "I have too much to live for now." He grabbed her face one last time, planting a hard, fast kiss on her forehead. "Lock the door, Emily," he commanded. "Do not open it until you hear my voice. not a recording. Me, Luca. I chose you, he said, his voice raw. Over the family, over the territory, over everything. When this is over, I will prove it to everyone. You are innocent, and you are mine. He stepped back and hit the button on the wall. The steel door began to slide shut. No, Luca! Emily reached out, but the heavy metal sealed with a resounding clang, separating them. She heard the mechanical whir of the locks engaging, 3 heavy deadbolts sliding into place, then silence. Inside the panic room, surrounded by monitors and supplies, Emily slid down the cold metal door until she hit the floor. She pressed her hands against her ears as the muffled sound of gunfire erupted right outside the bedroom door, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years that the monster she loved would survive the night. The heavy steel door of the panic room hissed open, breaking the silence that had felt like a tomb. Emily Carter scrambled back, grabbing a heavy flashlight as a weapon, but it was Lena standing there, her face smeared with soot and grim determination. "We have to move," Lena said, her voice tight. "The structural integrity is failing. The fire is spreading to the elevator shaft." "Where is Luca?" Emily demanded, rushing past her into the smoke-filled bedroom. "He is holding the lobby," Lena said, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her toward the service stairs. "He ordered me to get you to the extraction point. Convoy is waiting in the south alley." They ran. The descent was a blur of burning lungs and stinging eyes. When they burst out into the cool night air of the alley, 3 black SUVs were idling, engines roaring. Emily scanned the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Luca emerging from the rear exit of the building, flanked by 2 men. He was limping slightly, his white shirt stained crimson at the sleeve, but he was alive. "Luca!" she screamed, breaking from Lena's grip to run toward him. He looked up, relief washing over his bloodied features. He reached out for her. Then the world turned white. A flashbang grenade detonated between them, blinding and deafening. In the ringing silence that followed, tires screeched. Men in tactical gear dropped from the rooftops, rappelling down with terrifying speed. Before Emily could recover her vision, rough hands grabbed her. "No!" she shrieked. Kicking and clawing, she felt a needle prick her neck. The world began to tilt. Through the haze, she saw Luca fighting like a demon, shooting one attacker point blank and pistol whipping another. He was 10 feet away. 5 feet. "Emily!" His roar was a sound of pure, animalistic agony. He lunged for her, his fingers brushing the fabric of her coat just as she was shoved into the back of a nondescript van. The door slammed shut, severing the connection. As the van peeled away, tires smoking, the last thing Emily saw through the rear window was Luca Moretti falling to his knees in the middle of the alley, screaming her name into the uncaring night. The warehouse smelled of brine and old rust. Emily sat tied to a wooden chair in the center of a vast, empty floor. Her wrists were bound with zip ties that bit into her skin, but she was not bleeding. Victor Koval was a businessman, and he knew that damaged goods lost their value. He stood in front of a tripod-mounted camera, checking the feed on a tablet. He was a small man with eyes like polished stones and a suit that cost more than Emily's entire education. "You're shaking, Miss Carter," Victor noted, his voice smooth and oily. "There is no need. You are not the victim here. You are the message." He tapped the screen. The light on the camera turned red. "Live. Luca Moretti," Victor said, addressing the lens. He stepped aside so the camera could focus on Emily. She looked small and terrified, her hair messy, tears tracking through the soot on her face. "Behold the reason your empire is burning. You grew soft. You let a civilian into our world, and she made you weak. Look at her. This is your heart, is it not? And now, I hold it in my hand." Victor walked behind Emily, placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched violently, a whimper escaping her throat. "Surrender the ports," Victor commanded. "Surrender your territories. Step down, or I will close my hand and your heart will stop beating." He cut the feed. In the temporary command center, a fortified basement beneath a legitimate shipping company, Luca watched the screen go black. The silence in the room was absolute. He stood perfectly still, The bullet graze on his arm had been bandaged, but the blood had soaked through the white gauze. His face was a mask of death. There was no anger in his eyes, only a void where his soul used to be. "Boss," one of his captains said, hesitantly, "if we give him the ports, we lose everything, the revenue streams, the leverage. It is the end of the family." "We should cut our losses," another advisor murmured, though he refused to meet Luca's eyes. "She's just one woman, a liability." Luca turned his head slowly. The movement was predatory. "If you speak again," Luca said, his voice a low, terrifying monotone, "I will cut out your tongue." He walked to the map spread across the table. "I do not care about the ports," Luca stated. "I do not care about the money. I do not care if we burn every asset we have built over the last 50 years. We are getting her back." "We do not know where she is," the captain argued weakly. "That warehouse could be anywhere." The door to the command center burst open. Lena marched in, holding a laptop. She looked furious. "We know exactly where she is," Lena announced, "and we know how they took her." She slammed the laptop onto the table. "I ran the trace you asked for. Luca, the internal upload that framed Emily, it came from a terminal with biometric access, and the convoy route tonight, it was leaked 5 minutes before we left the penthouse." "Who?" Luca asked. The word was a blade. Lena looked across the room. Her eyes landed on the man standing in the shadows, sipping a glass of water. Matteo. The room seemed to freeze. Matteo lowered the glass. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "Is this true?" Luca asked. He didn't raise his voice. He walked around the table, closing the distance between them. Matteo set the glass down. He straightened his jacket. "She ruined you. Luca." "She saved me," Luca corrected. "She made you weak," Matteo shouted, finally snapping. The veneer of loyalty cracked, revealing the rotting jealousy beneath. "You were a king. You were feared. Then she walks in with her sad eyes and her trembling hands, and suddenly you are hesitant. You are negotiating instead of killing. You are hiding in beach houses." "So you sold her to Victor," Luca said, stopping 3 feet away. "You framed an innocent woman." "I did what had to be done to save the family," Matteo spat. "Victor promised me the throne if I delivered you. He understands what power requires. You have forgotten." "I have forgotten nothing," Luca said softly. Matteo's hand twitched toward his hip. It was a reflex, a desperate move by a man who knew he was already dead. He went for his gun. Luca moved faster than thought. There was a flash of movement, a blur of motion too fast to track. Luca drew the pistol from his waistband and fired a single shot. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Matteo crumpled to the floor. He didn't suffer. It was a clean, precise shot to the heart. The room was silent again, save for the ringing in everyone's ears. Luca stood over the body of the man who had been his brother for 10 years. He didn't look triumphant, he looked weary. He reached down and pulled Matteo's phone from his pocket. He pressed the dead man's thumb to the sensor to unlock it. He scrolled for a moment, then looked up at his men. His eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire. "I have the location," Luca said. "Load up. We're going to war." The assault on the Koval warehouse was not a battle. It was an execution. Luca led the charge. He didn't stay in the back giving orders. He was the tip of the spear. He moved through the smoke and the chaos like a wraith, cutting down Victor's mercenaries with a ruthless efficiency that terrified even his own men. They breached the main doors with explosives. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks. Luca didn't flinch. He moved from cover to cover, his focus singular. He was not fighting for territory. He was fighting for the woman who had held his hand on a balcony and told him she wasn't scared anymore. He found them in the main processing bay. Victor was using Emily as a human shield, a gun pressed to her temple. She was crying, her eyes squeezed shut, shaking violently. "Stop!" Victor screamed, his voice cracking with panic as he saw his men falling around him. "Take one more step and I paint the wall with her." Luca stopped. He stood amidst the bodies of his enemies, his chest heaving, his gun trained on Victor's head. He was 20 feet away. "Let her go. Victor?" Luca said. His voice was calm. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. "Drop the gun!" Victor shrieked. "Drop it or she dies!" Luca looked at Emily. She opened her eyes. She saw him. She saw the blood on his shirt, the soot on his face, and the absolute, unwavering love in his eyes. "Do it," Emily whispered. She didn't mean drop the gun. She meant take the shot. "I can't," Luca said softly. "You are too close." "He's going to kill us both anyway," Emily sobbed. "Please, Luca." Victor laughed, a high, manic sound. "See? She knows. You're weak. Moretti. You can't do it." Victor shifted, trying to drag Emily toward the rear exit. In that split second, Emily made her move. She stomped on Victor's foot with all her strength and threw her weight backward, an end knocking him off balance. The gun slipped from her temple. Luca fired. He didn't aim for Victor's head. The risk was too high. He aimed for the shoulder exposed by Emily's movement. The bullet struck Victor, spinning him around. He screamed and fired blindly as he fell. A hot, searing pain tore through Luca's left shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back, but he didn't go down. He dropped his gun and sprinted forward. "Luca!" Emily screamed as Victor tried to raise his weapon again with his good hand. Luca reached him before he could pull the trigger. He didn't use a gun, he used his hands. He disarmed Victor with a bone-breaking twist and delivered a single, knockout blow that sent the Koval boss into unconsciousness. It was over. Luca turned to Emily. She was still tied to the chair, sobbing, staring at the blood spreading across his shoulder. "You are hurt," she choked out. Luca ignored the wound. He pulled a knife from his belt and slashed the zip ties binding her wrists. The moment she was free, she launched herself at him. He caught her with his good arm, pulling her against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her fear and her life. She was shaking apart in his arms, her hands clutching his bloody shirt, her tears soaking through the fabric. "I have you," Luca rasped, his voice breaking. "I have you, Emily. I thought I would never see you again." She wept. "I was so scared." Luca pulled back slightly, cupping her face with his hand, the hand that had just ended a war. His thumb stroked her cheek, smearing a streak of soot, but his touch was agonizingly tender. "I told you," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "I told you I would be gentle." He looked deep into her eyes, ignoring the chaos of his men securing the building around them. "I have been gentle for as long as you needed," Luca vowed, his voice raw with the truth of it. "And I will keep being gentle with you, for the rest of my life. Except with anyone who tries to hurt you. For them, I will be the monster." Emily sobbed a laugh, pulling his face down to hers. She kissed him, tasting the salt of tears and the metallic tang of blood, but mostly tasting the overwhelming relief of survival. The cleanup was swift. Victor Koval was not killed. Death was too easy. Instead, he was dragged into a room with a camera. Luca stood behind the camera, his shoulder bandaged, his face stony. "Speak," Luca ordered. Victor, broken and beaten, looked into the lens. "Emily Carter is innocent," he rasped, reading the statement Lena had prepared. "She was never a mole. She never betrayed the Moretti family. I fabricated the evidence. I used her as bait because I knew she was the only way to get to Luca Moretti." And, Luca prompted darkly, "And I failed," Victor whispered, "because he chose her." Luca stopped the recording. He sent the file to every associate, every lieutenant, and every rival family in the city. Within the hour, Emily's name was cleared. The whispers stopped. The respect returned, not because she was the boss's girlfriend, but because she was the woman the boss had burned down the world to save. 3 weeks later, the city of Eastbridge was quiet, bathed in the golden light of dusk. The Moretti penthouse was different now. The guards were still there, but fewer of them. The atmosphere was lighter. Luca sat in the living room, reading a contract. It was the deed to the shipping yards, not for smuggling, but for legitimate logistics. He was dismantling the dark parts of his empire, piece by piece. It was slow work, dangerous work, but he was doing it. He heard soft footsteps. Emily walked into the room. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked healed. The bruises had faded. The fear in her eyes was gone. She stopped in front of him. Luca set the papers aside. "We need to talk," he said. Emily tilted her head. About what? About the future, Luca said. He stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the city, he used to rule with an iron fist. I have set up accounts for you and Noah. In Switzerland. New identities. Enough money to live comfortably for 3 lifetimes. He turned to face her. You can go. Emily, you can take Noah and disappear. No more guns. No more fear. You can be free. It was the hardest offer he had ever made. Every cell in his body screamed at him to keep her, but he knew he had to give her the choice. Emily looked at him. She looked at the sling arm holding his healing shoulder. She looked at the lines of worry etched into his forehead. She walked over to him. She didn't take the papers. She didn't ask about the money. She climbed into his lap, straddling his legs, her dress pooling around them. Luca's hands came up to rest on her waist instinctively, holding her steady. She reached out and traced the edge of the bandage on his shoulder. You took a bullet for me, she whispered. I would take 1,000, Luca replied simply. You changed your entire life for me, she continued. You are dismantling your empire. It was worth it, Luca said. But you deserve peace. Emily, I am still a dangerous man. I know, Emily said. She placed her hands on his cheeks, forcing him to look at her. But you are my dangerous man. She leaned in, her eyes searching his. I am not scared of you anymore. Luca, she told him, her voice steady and sure. I am not scared of your past. I am not scared of your scars. She kissed the corner of his mouth. The only thing I am scared of, she whispered against his lips, is a life without you. So do not ask me to leave, because I am not going anywhere. Luca let out a shuddering breath, the last wall around his heart collapsing. He wrapped his good arm around her, pulling her as close as physics would allow. Then stay, he murmured against her skin. Stay, and let me love you. I am staying, Emily promised. He cupped her face, tilting her head back, and kissed her. It was a kiss of profound, earth-shattering gentleness. It was a promise made in the dark and kept in the light. It was the end of the fear and the beginning of something complicated, dangerous, and undeniably beautiful. As the city lights of Eastbridge flickered to life below them, reflecting in the floor-to-ceiling glass, Luca and Emily held each other in the silence of the penthouse. They were 2 survivors of a brutal world, choosing each other amidst the wreckage, ready to face whatever came next, together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm scared of you, she admitted, the Mafia boss whispered. Then I'll be gentle until you're not. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Luca and Emily as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories and hitting the like button. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section below. I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time.